All right, awesome. I think it's going. Okay, so we'll
Perfect.
start with the marketing questions.
That
First
sounds
off,
good.
what inspired you to create IgnitePost?
Yes. Excellent question. So really, honestly, the thing that inspired me to create IgnitePost was this fundamental shift I saw towards what I like to call the relationship-centric era. Uh, but really kind of, it's an approach, especially for the marketing and sales kind of realm, but it kind of applies across the board to a bunch of different areas. So really what I saw was we've kind of entered this new era where it's becoming increasingly more important for everybody to actually cultivate and develop a better relationship with their customers, whether that's prospective customers or current customers. And I noticed it because we're kind of now living in this time where everybody is inundated with a lot of digital outreach, whether that's email, digital ads, push notifications on every device that we own. And so when I try to look forward to say, all right, what does the world look like, a decade from now, 2 decades from now? It was hard for me to think that it would be doing more and more of the same. So more digital outreach, more saturation, because I felt like people were kind of already there. So what I really wanted to do, the kind of impetus for me to start IgnitePost, was trying to figure out how to enable brands to really bring it back to being human a little bit more. And that was really kind of the genesis of the whole business, is this fundamental shift to, in the future, we really believe that it's going to be more about developing actual real relationships with your prospects and customers. And how do you do that at scale if you're, a big company or a big business? And so that's really what we did. So with IgnitePost, we took a very, very personal form of communication, which is the handwritten note, and enabled businesses to use it at scale to develop and cultivate relationships and build deeper relationships, with knowing that the ultimate business goal was cultivate deeper relationships, which will hopefully lead to more customer interaction, a stronger connection between you and your customers, and then ultimately more sales. And whether that's new sales or just growing your existing customer base, kind of depends on what you're using the service for. But that's kind of the whole idea behind IgnitePost.
Beautiful answer. Um, so since you've created this is your second endeavor.
Yep.
What is the best piece of advice for young entrepreneurs hoping to build their own company?
Yeah. So there's a lot of advice out there. I think my biggest piece of advice would probably be to just start where you are. Don't wait for you to be quote unquote ready. From my perspective, this is like my second company now. You're never ready ever. So I feel a lot of people kind of wait for that perfect opportunity or that perfect idea, or like timing to be right in your life. And to this day, if you talk to anybody who's ever started a company, they will literally tell you there's no such thing as perfect timing or the perfect idea. There's always going to be flaws with the idea or flaws with the approach, or both pros and cons for why you should start a business. If you wait for that pro list to be like, there's all of these pros of why I should do it and there's no cons, like it's like we should do it now, chances are the opportunity has already passed you. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably my biggest the biggest thing that I try to instill in others is don't wait for things to be ready. You're never going to be ready. Like, start where you are and just make progress now in any way that you possibly can. And as you go, you'll learn and you'll figure things out. Everybody always says that, building a company is like jumping off of a cliff and trying to construct an airplane on the way down before you hit the ground. So, you're never ready to do that. So the only way to know if you're ready is to actually do it. So that would be my recommendation, is just start where you are, and you'll have confidence that you'll be able to figure things out as you go.
So on the same note, would you say that's the best piece of advice you've ever received, or was there a specific piece of advice that you received when you first getting started that you're like, okay, I can do this?
Yeah, so that's a good question too. So I think honestly, the best piece of advice regarding starting a business that I've ever received is actually a mentor once told me, listen, there's only one rule when you start a company: don't die. That's it. Like, as long as the company doesn't die, you'll do well. And it turns out if you if you create a company and you can keep it around for long enough, chances are you've figured things out enough to actually build a decent business.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that it's funny just because it's super simple, but it's not easy,
Yeah.
So that I think that's comically probably the best advice I've ever received, just because it's so intricate and there's so many things in there. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, I think the worst piece of advice I've ever received is, somebody also told me, don't do any work unless you get paid for it. And I also think on kind of the other side of the coin, that's terrible advice.
Mm-hmm.
When I look back at my career, there are so many times throughout my life that I've worked for free, specifically to learn a particular skill that I didn't really have a lot of experience with, or starting a business, I went an extra mile for a particular customer or even a prospect that I was trying to land. So there's a huge case to be made for working for free or for doing work that you don't get paid for, because those are the things that matter and they end up paying dividends down the road.
Mm-hmm.
So, similarly to the best advice I've ever received, I think that's probably the worst advice I've ever received is don't do any work you don't get paid for. Because for the most part, that's really what separates great businesses from just average ones is people are willing to go the extra mile, even though it may not be in their job description or even though they
Mm-hmm.
might not get paid for it. So that I think those are interesting, like kind of two different perspectives of how to look at things.
Perfect. Who inspires you and why?
So I think for me, honestly, my fiance is the one that inspires me the most every single day, which is an easy one, which is why I decided to marry her. But
Yeah.
when you start a business, it's super important to have a support system that you can lean on. So from number one, having somebody that you can lean on that supports you in everything that you do is super important, right? It's crazy to start a business. There's no logical reason to do it. If you actually look at the statistics, something like 80% of businesses fail, most within the first year of getting started. And even then, it kind of takes a while to actually get going. So if you look at the statistics, there's no logical reason why people would want to do this. So it's very important to have a support system there. But then kind of going beyond that, she inspires me because she makes me a better person every single day. Beyond this kind of support, she works at the hospital, so she's an anesthesia provider, which is kind of a completely different field, something I know very little about, kind of the health field. But she's got huge ambitions on her own to start her own business, and seeing how devoted she is and how hard she works day in, day out to make progress. Again, like I was mentioning before, just kind of starting where she is and just figuring it out as she goes. That's
Mm-hmm.
super inspiring to me. So, and it helps that it's someone that I interact with on a daily basis, but I pull a lot of the inspirations that I use on a daily basis from her.
It's a great answer. Very nice. So similar note, what brands inspire you and why?
Yeah. One of my favorite brands that really inspires me is Patagonia. So number
Mm-hmm.
one, so I'm a big outdoor person, so I love skiing, hiking, biking, all kinds of things. But which they're great for. But overall, I really think that they do a really good job with their mission and how their mission kind of permeates throughout the entire company. Uh, in particular, they're a brand that really kind of keeps the bigger picture in mind. And so whether that's talking about the environment, making people understand how important it is to kind of protect natural resources, uh, shedding light on things like climate change. I think they do a really good job of promoting the ideals that are kind of most fond to them. But then if you interact with their brand and interact with their company or walk into a store, it kind of permeates through everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So one, I like their mission and I like their brand in general, but I think on the other side of that coin, they also did a really good job making sure that that feeling and that mission is instilled through all of their employees, which then also comes out if you actually interact with anybody either on their team or walk into a store. It's kind of all encompassing. So
Mm-hmm.
I like that total picture and that
Mm-hmm.
total brand experience, and I think they do a really awesome
I agree. I love Patagonia.
job. Right?
Yeah, they're a great brand. What is the most interesting trend you see happening in our industry right now?
So I think one of the interesting things that I actually, I'm curious to see kind of where this goes, but just less formality in general. So one of the trends that's happening in marketing and definitely in sales is there's this movement to being a little bit less formal than I think
Mm-hmm.
in decades past. So even if you look at a lot of the marketing messages, if you look at the outreach techniques, it's all moving to being a little bit less formal and even more conversational, right? We're seeing rise
Mm-hmm.
of things like uh, text messaging and SMS being a lot more prevalent, just because it fits more in line with how people are, right? I think brands are starting to realize people are on the go. People don't necessarily have the time and energy to take in the more formal types of communication that have been maybe a little bit more standard in the past. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's an interesting thing that is kind of moving across the industry now, is this brand of like, listen, let's meet people where they are and let's figure out how we can interact with people in these kind of shorter, less formal ways and do more of it instead of kind of one-off, longer types
Right.
of communication. So I'm very interested to see where that goes. Now, that's a trend that I'm certainly seeing. It also poses risks of, like we talked about before, oversaturation, right? I
Mm-hmm.
used to love text messaging. That used to be the best way to get a hold of me because I would respond to every single text message I got, and I knew that if somebody was texting me, it was probably important. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that behavior in myself, I actually see changing now because I've been getting more and more of the unsolicited text messages from brands. It's an
Mm-hmm.
election year, certainly from elections. So,
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested to see where that goes because even that now, I know myself, I don't give it. It doesn't hold that quite the same amount of weight that it used to hold for me. So while it's an interesting trend that's happening, I'm interested to keep an eye on it to see how it evolves into the future.
Yeah. If it almost goes the same way that emails sort of been going. I
Exactly.
completely
Right.
understand.
Yeah. So,
So, thinking of email, on the flip side, what's your favorite thing about receiving a handwritten letter?
excellent question. I think the emotions, first and foremost. So, when I receive a handwritten letter, I think of it like Christmas morning, right? So, every time somebody receives a handwritten letter, it's almost like a mini gift, right?
Mm-hmm.
You may or may not know who sent the letter or what's inside, but chances are, you put more value on it, and chances are you're going to like whatever is in that was in that letter.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that's my biggest, I guess, like about receiving a handwritten letter. Uh, but the other thing that's really interesting is that type of interaction typically only happens about once every 7 weeks. So somebody
Yeah.
receives a personal letter about once every 7 weeks on average. So it's crazy to me that those emotions that get evoked when somebody receives a handwritten letter is so few and far between. Again, goes back to one of the reasons why we decided to start IgnitePost. One of the reasons why the service is so effective is because of the kind of science and psychology behind receiving a handwritten correspondence of any kind.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of science and articles out there, but as human beings, we've evolved. Our reptilian brains have evolved such that things that we can tangibly touch and feel and hold connect with us on a subconscious level and actually mean more to us. So that
Yeah.
means things that we actually put in people's hands, they value more. So if we can combine that fact with the fact that the thing in someone's hand is a personalized handwritten note that has been sent to somebody, it's a super powerful combination. So uh,
Yeah.
I would say it was the emotions that get invoked. That's like my favorite thing about receiving a handwritten letter or card.
Yeah. I have a feeling this will be a similar answer, but why are you passionate about what we do?
Yeah, so it's definitely along the same lines, but
Yeah.
in general, I really like using technology to help humans, right? At the end of the day, we're in this and we create products and services to help humans in some way, right? Every business is out there to solve some type of pain. So for me, my background is in engineering. I love the fact that I can use that background to, and kind of put a technology twist on it to help humans communicate in a more personal way, evoke those emotions that we were just talking about before, and really help businesses grow and solve a lot of the pains that they're having.
Mm-hmm.
So, for me, it's really kind of about both things. It's about using technology. I'm a technologist at heart, so I love creating technology, and specifically creating technology that is designed for humans and to help them personalize outreach and to connect with other humans in a more personal way. So those two in combo, it's kind of that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. That's kind of why I'm passionate about what we do.
Great answer. Now, there's no real good segue for my next two questions, so I'm just gonna fire them at you.
All right,
What do you think?
let's hear
What
it.
do you think the biggest mistake a salesperson can make is?
I think that probably the biggest mistake is really trying to sell, right? And not earning a person's trust before trying to sell. The goal of trying to sell anything, whether it's a product or service, is to kind of approach it as a mutual exploration of how your product or service could solve a problem for that prospect. Again, goes back to kind of what we were talking about before. Every business out there was created because it solves a problem for some subset of customers. So the way to approach sales in general is not to think of it like sales. It's really approaching it like a mutual exploration of, listen, here's what we can provide, here's what our product or service does, let's see how this maps onto your current pains, and if it does, great, and if not, how else can I help, right? So a lot of people forget that when somebody buys a product or service, they really are buying the salesperson, right? Like when you're talking to somebody, you're not trying to sell them on the service, you're selling really them on yourself. It's people that make the buying decisions. And so I think that's the biggest mistake that a lot of folks make, is they kind of forget that you're talking to another human, another person, and they're the ones that are going to be making the decision. So kind of flipping that around in people's minds, I think that's the mistake that I generally see made more often than not.
Great answer. And then this kind of goes along with some of the stuff we talked about earlier, but what's the biggest challenge you faced when starting your own business?
The biggest challenge I face, honestly, is probably knowing what you don't know, right? So when you start a business, the challenge is, again, you don't really know what's going to be thrown at you as you start and build the company. You don't know everything that you need to know. So one of the biggest challenges for entrepreneurs at any stage is bringing in expertise to fill in gaps that is going to be critical to your company's success. So that to me is always a big challenge, and it's always something that I'm constantly working on to improve. And I think it's going to be a challenge no matter whether you're a startup or you're an established business. You're always trying to fill gaps and get as much info and data as you possibly can, especially in areas that are critical to success. So for me, it's about that kind of problem, and that kind of knowing what I don't know is about finding the right people on the team to get involved to guide myself and the rest of the team. So I try to hire people who hopefully know more than I do about specific areas that I think we need to be improving on. Lean on advisors and investors who, again, have expertise in particular areas that we think are going to be critical to our success, and then also play a critical role in the actual evolution of the business. So I think in general, the biggest challenge that any business faces is having a clear understanding what they know and what they don't know, and having a way to get knowledge into the business to fill those critical gaps.
Great.